Beijing is responding firmly to the U.S.'s ban on Huawei, the telecoms giant that is also one of China's most renowned brands globally. Are the American actions part of a broader trade and economic battle with China? And from the ongoing conference on dialogue of Asian civilizations, I interviewed a participant from Malaysia, one of Asia's most culturally diverse societies. How do they strike a balance between diversity and unity? Welcome to The Point, an opinion show coming to you from Beijing. I'm Li Xin. China is warning the U.S. do not exacerbate trade and economic relations. Amid the escalating trade war between the world's two largest economies, the Trump administration seems to have roped in Huawei by blocking the Chinese telecoms giant from doing business in America or with U.S. companies. Beyond the hundreds of billions of dollars worth of goods now targeted for more tariffs, some U.S. analysts suggest the move against Huawei raises the specter that Beijing may retaliate against U.S. companies inside China's vast consumer market. Moreover, by barring Huawei from all economic activities with America, some analysts say it undermines the central U.S. argument that its primary concern with Huawei's 5G technology is that it represents a national security threat. How will China respond, and are we moving too far from a negotiated resolution? Joining us in Beijing is Professor Gong of the University of International Business and Economics, and from Philadelphia, the U.S., Blackburn-Dwyer, president of Grasshopper Group. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Now, let's first take a look at Huawei's response to the U.S.'s action. In a statement, Huawei says this decision is in no one's interest and will do significant economic harm to the American companies with which Huawei does business, affect tens of thousands of American jobs, and disrupt the current collaboration and mutual trust that exist on the global supply chain. And Huawei will seek remedies immediately and find a resolution to this matter, and will also proactively endeavor to mitigate the impacts of this incident. So, John, let me go to you. How bad is this decision for Huawei? Is this going to cripple the company in any way?
No, it's not likely to cripple the company. Thanks to its foresightedness, to CEO Mr. Lin's foresightedness, Huawei actually has been preparing for this date for some time already. There's a letter from Huawei's subsidiary CEO today saying that this company called HiSilicon has been preparing for a lot of products, especially semiconductor products that currently Huawei buys from American companies, just in case the supply is somehow cut off. The statement, I read this letter very carefully. It says that most of the products currently being bought from the United States can be supplied by this company, HiSilicon. I also want to point out that Huawei's supply chain in the United States represents a $11 billion business. This is about 10% of Huawei's total revenue, and that business itself represents a lot of job opportunities in the United States and company profits as well. These are, big names in the U.S. companies like Intel, Qualcomm, Qorvo, Skyworks, those brand name companies in the United States. So I think we probably shouldn't rush too much to the conclusion that business is already cut off from the United States. I think the state look at the decision from the Department of Commerce, Bureau of Industry and Security. It hasn't set a date yet when this thing is going to take effect yet. Okay. So I think there's still room for dialogue and negotiation.
We're going to talk about that timing issue in just a moment. Let me zoom out, however. As we know, on the eve of the 11th round of trade negotiations between the two sides, U.S. President Donald Trump suddenly accused the Chinese side of so-called reneging on some commitments already agreed up, which Beijing denied. Nevertheless, the U.S. announced a new tariff on some $200 billion worth of Chinese imports, and last week China counterpunched, slapping new tariffs on $60 billion worth of American goods. So, Brandon, to what degree, if any, is this ban against Huawei and its affiliates linked to the trade war, and why now?
Well, let's take some of the zooming out issues. The U-turn, shall we say, in trade talks that happened about 2 weeks ago. It's a bit of a blame game. Something changed. Whether it was President Trump sort of overreacting to a change in stance from the United States about Wednesday of last week, whether it was truth to the reports that Chinese negotiators came in two Mondays ago and sort of changed their stance or said, look, things we've been negotiating we're not going to do. Who knows? Something changed. President Trump definitely reacted like it was the Chinese. The Chinese definitely reacted like it the U.S. But we're not in those rooms, so we don't know exactly what it was. Now, Huawei has always been sort of this thread that has been traced all the way back to the Bush administration. Concerns about the national security issues with Huawei have been ongoing in the United States from a Republican president to a Democratic president to President Trump. And so President Trump has really made it clear that he thinks of these things often as one issue, but a lot of the rank and file members of the United States government see them as separate. Now, the timing, the ban, the going forward with the executive order, there's no way to interpret that other than a political step by an administration looking for every pressure point it can find to try to get the deal it wants out of China.
John, your take?
I mostly agree, but I also want to add that Huawei is somehow a very different company in the eyes of the United States. I mean, there are those people in the intelligence community in the United States who are bent on going after this company for many years already. I mean, I think the earliest investigation of Huawei went back at least 10 years ago. And these people have been, I think they have a personal vendetta so far against Huawei. So I think it's more than just a sort of using Huawei as a case as a political play in the bigger context of Sino-US trade tensions. And these people have an agenda. They are bent on destroying this company, a very successful company. And also I think this company is particularly of interest to these people because there are actually no competitors in the United States. Companies like Motorola, companies like Lucent Technologies, they're all gone in the wireless business. So I think, you know, for various reasons, there is a group of people, in my opinion, very powerful people in the deep state. They are bent on going after this company and destroying Huawei, but they're not going to succeed, in my opinion.
There are headlines in the West which says that this is part of the U.S.'s battle, overall battle, being economic trade, or, you know, the overall rivalry the U.S. sees in this relationship with China. Do you see it this way, a stepping up of that kind of look on U.S.-China relations, Brandon?
I do, unfortunately, and this is, I think, one of the problems, right? So the history, and my colleague, I think, has given some good points on the history of the Huawei issue. There are some people in the U.S. intelligence community that have concerns. There are people in the business community that have concerns. Some of the legal actions that have been taken in the courts speak to those legitimate concerns. Very concerning activity around technology, potential accusations about theft from T-Mobile and other things, or inappropriate behavior. All of those, to me, say that there are legitimate concerns, not necessarily legitimate accusations, or that the accusations are all true, but there are concerns about Huawei and its interest and its role and its activities. But the problem is that President Trump and his administration has taken those legitimate concerns and married them directly to the political attacks, to the trade issues. And to me, that really walks into a lot of the narrative that China has always said, which is that these aren't legitimate concerns, they're political pressure points. Right. And so by basically just saying, yeah, these are political pressure points, they undermine over a decade of, as I said, legitimate concerns and investigations. Not necessarily saying they're all right, but that there was, I think, a separate activity going on for 10 years, and now we've married the two.
Okay, John?
Well, I disagree with the statement that it's a legitimate concern. I mean, look at these two cases. One case that's already been settled between Huawei and T-Mobile. It was a case involving a careless employee from Huawei, and I think the company's already fired this employee, and this case was already closed. So you have a settlement with T-Mobile, and for many years, the United States government didn't do anything with respect to Huawei, and now they came back to pick this case again. The case against Mrs. Mun, you know, the so-called Huawei's involvement in exporting products into Iran. I think this is also a very old case. I mean, the U.S. government, and this happened many years ago, and the U.S. government didn't take any action, and now they're picking up this case again. So I think these issues are clearly, you know, used as for political cause, and also the so-called concern about spying and collaboration with the Chinese government for intelligence work. all this stuff so far hasn't produced a shred of evidence. I keep saying
so
this.
John, yeah, what are we seeing then? Then why now all of a sudden this sharp turn in this old case, but making a big fuss out of this old case at this particular moment when the trade relations between these two countries are at a very crucial moment, and the U.S. has come up with such a action, and the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs says don't exacerbate the already damaged relationship, economic and trade relations between the two sides. Why did the U.S. want to do this now?
Well, President Trump wants to use this case as sort of a bargaining chip on the table with China in the trade negotiation. And those people
you think
are wrong.
so? Because there are people who are saying that this is a broader battle that the United States is waging against China now.
Now, having said that, there are also people, as I said, in the intelligence community, seize this opportunity to initiate a sort of a personal vendetta against Huawei. They see this as a very good chance.
Is it all just about Huawei?
Well, I think in this case, Huawei is very different. They pick out Huawei to engage in this, vicious attack on this company, bent on destroying this company. Of course, there's a broader context here. There's a trade negotiation between China and the U.S. and Chinese companies operating in the United States. Well, especially operating very successfully on the world stage, in my opinion, are all targets by the Trump administration.
Okay, let me go to Brandon. Brandon, your pick. Is it just against the Chinese company Huawei?
No. It is a flashpoint. It is a focusing point. It is an issue. The executive order, I think, is aimed at giving President Trump wide powers to be able to pick and choose companies that he or his administration actually like. The obvious first example is Huawei. So when he says this isn't about them, it absolutely is, but it's also about further power. But in the broader situation, the Huawei issue, I think President Trump, this is a guy who I think a couple of years ago would have said this is a deep state issue that the United States government is overextending, right? Because he loves talking about the deep state in the United States. But now that he's in this war with China, needs to look like a tough guy, he's going to the kitchen sink. He's throwing everything he can get at the issue to basically create a deal in his mind that he feels like he bullied China into. And that's not going to work. He is not understanding that China's never going to react to bullying. Most of the world doesn't react to bullying on trade. And he's trying to basically say this is about economics, this is about technology, oh, it's also about national security, oh, it's also about that. Hey, it's not about the farmers who are committing suicide and being foreclosed because China stopped buying food from them. It's about Huawei and its evilness. So he is literally the magician trying to create misdirection everywhere he can, and Huawei is a wonderful misdirect for him.
All right, so John, very quickly, I have about 20 seconds left. How is China going to react? Is China going to retaliate against such a ban on Chinese companies' legitimate rights, according to the Chinese?
Well, I think the Chinese government is going to help Huawei to some extent, but I think the statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is actually a very measured response. It emphasized on one side that Chinese companies operating overseas need to abide by the laws in foreign countries, but also said that the interests of Chinese companies is going to be defended. So I think, but China is not going to retaliate on corporate America operating in China. That's just sinking to the low point. It's not going to do that.
Why not?
Well, I think because the attack on Huawei is totally illegitimate, and I don't think that China is going to retaliate in another illegitimate ways. I think at this point of time, American companies operating in China are the bridges between the United States and China. It contributes to the
and China doesn't want to burn these bridges.
Exactly. I think the two economies intertwine, and they don't want to burn that bridge.
All right. We're going to leave it there. Many thanks, Professor Gong of the University of International Business and Economics, and from Philadelphia, Brandon Blackburn-Dwyer, President of Grasshopper Group.